The ship landed gently on the dusty ground of Outpost 7, a quiet station on the edge of human and alien territory. The sky above was pale blue, but the air was heavy with silence. No one cheered. No one waved flags. This was not a moment of celebration. It was a moment of survival. The ramp of the shuttle opened with a soft hiss. A group of tall, thin figures stepped out. They were the Velari refugees from a broken planet. Their skin was pale silver. Their eyes were dark like deep wells. They moved quietly, each step full of fear and caution. Among them was Riala, a young Velari woman. Her shoulders were narrow, her hands thin, and her eyes scanned the new place with nervous speed. She had never seen a human face before, not outside of the old warning videos. The stories from her people were clear. Humans were fast, loud, dangerous. They smiled when they were angry. They tricked with soft voices. She stayed near the back of the group, hoping not to be noticed. But her eyes caught the figure waiting near the supply crates. A human stood there. He wore a gray shirt with rolled-up sleeves. His face was tired but calm. His name tag said Tom. He didn't carry a weapon. He just stood there, watching, not speaking. When the last of the Velari stepped down, Tom took a step forward. Riala's heart pounded. She looked for a place to hide, but there was nowhere to go. Her hands tightened around the strap of her small bag. She didn't breathe. She didn't blink. Tom saw the fear. He stopped walking. Slowly, he raised one hand, not to threaten, just to wave. Riala flinched. It was not a big movement, but it was enough. Her shoulders jerked. Her head turned away. Her feet shifted like she was ready to run. The others around her didn't react, but inside, her thoughts were loud. He didn't come closer. Instead, Tom crouched down near one of the crates. He opened it and pulled out a sealed bottle of water and a rolled-up thermal blanket. He placed them gently on a low bench nearby. Then he stood up, nodded once, and walked away. Riala kept her eyes on him until he disappeared behind the outpost wall. She waited. No one else moved. The group was told to find shelter and rest. Some Velari walked toward the far side of the camp where temporary tents had been set up. But Riala stayed near the bench. She stared at the blanket. It was clean. The water bottle was still cold. She didn't understand. Was it a trick? A test? Would the human come back and laugh if she touched it? Her stomach growled. Her arms ached. She hadn't slept in days. Slowly, carefully, she moved forward and picked up the blanket. It was soft, made of some material she didn't recognize. She wrapped it around her shoulders and sat down on the bench. The sun began to fall. A few stars blinked in the early evening sky. She sat there for a long time, just watching the camp. The humans and Velari didn't talk. They moved in separate groups. No one shouted, but the silence felt like a wall between them. When the cold wind picked up, Riala opened the bottle. She took a sip. It tasted pure, better than the recycled water from her ship. She looked again in the direction where the human had walked away. He didn't come back. Later that night, a worker from the outpost came to check on the supplies. He saw her sitting alone and said something in English she didn't understand. But his tone was calm. When she didn't reply, he simply gave her a small packet of food and walked on. Riala didn't eat it right away. She waited until she was sure no one was watching. Then she opened the packet and took a bite. The food was strange but warm. She slept near the wall of the supply building, wrapped in the blanket the human had left. She didn't dream. The next morning, the sun rose quietly. The camp was already awake. Humans moved between buildings, checking wires, cleaning filters, fixing pipes. Velari workers were being assigned duties, mostly to clean or carry equipment. Riala stayed near the edge of the group. A voice called names. She didn't understand most of the words. But when someone tapped her shoulder and pointed to a work zone, she followed. There, fixing a panel near the water system, was the same human Tom. He didn't look up at first. He was busy checking cables and reading a data pad. Riala felt her chest tighten. She almost turned around, but someone behind her waved her forward. Tom finally looked up. Their eyes met. He didn't smile wide or wave again. He just gave a small nod and pointed toward a tool on the ground. Then he returned to his work. She walked closer, picked up the tool, and handed it to him. His hands were rough but steady. He took the tool without speaking and used it to fix the panel. They worked side by side for 2 hours. No words were exchanged, no sudden movements, just quiet. Focus. When the job was done, he stood up and looked at her again. This time, Riala didn't flinch. She didn't smile, but she didn't step back either. He gave a short nod, like a silent thank you. Then he walked off, leaving her to wonder how someone so feared could act with such patience. That night, she kept the blanket close. She didn't yet know the humans' language or his reason for kindness, but something inside her had changed. She no longer believed all humans were monsters, and for the first time in many years, she felt a small spark of safety. Not much, but enough to stay. The sun had not yet risen over Outpost 7, but the station was already busy. Engineers walked from room to room, checking systems. Food containers were being unloaded. Dust swirled outside the large airlocks. Inside, Riala moved carefully along the wall of a long corridor. She had learned not to make sudden movements. She kept her eyes low and her steps light. The other Villari didn't talk much either. They followed orders, finished tasks, and returned to their tents without trouble. The humans were different. Some joked with each other while they worked. Others listened to music through small earpieces. But none had spoken to Riala, not since her first work shift with Tom. That day, she had carried tools for him and stayed silent. He had not forced conversation. He had worked with steady hands and calm eyes. It was strange, but she had felt less afraid near him today. She had been assigned to clean and check the air vents along the east wing. It was a quiet task. She liked quiet, but the temperature inside the outpost had started to fall. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Then her breath turned white in the air. Something was wrong. She looked around. The lights flickered once. Then again, a loud voice echoed through the hallway from a speaker above. Power drop in residential zone. Heating offline. Engineers en route. Riala didn't understand every word, but the message made her tense. The air was getting colder. Her thin uniform wasn't made for this. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept walking. But her legs began to shake. Not from fear this time, but from the cold. The hallway ahead was darker than the rest. No one else was there. Her fingers went numb. She reached a corner near the supply room and stopped. Her breath was heavy. Her knees touched the floor. She sat down, curled into herself, and waited for the shaking to stop. Did and single quotes T. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. Fast. Boots against the metal floor. She looked up, startled. Tom turned the corner, holding a small hand lamp and wearing his usual gray jacket. He saw her and froze. Riala tried to stand, but her legs didn't respond. He moved closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. She tensed, but instead of speaking, he knelt beside her and pulled off his jacket. Without touching her, he laid it across her shoulders. The fabric was warm. It smelled of old oil and clean air. She held it tight. Tom opened a small metal box he had with him and took out a heat patch. He pressed a button, and it began to glow slightly. He placed it near her feet. Then he sat down a short distance away. No questions. No orders. Just silence. For several minutes, they both sat there. The patch warmed the small space. Her shaking slowed. Tom pulled out a small container and opened it. Inside were two protein bars. He placed one near her and started eating. The other, Riala looked at the food. She was hungry, but still unsure. Tom didn't push. He just sat and ate, then leaned back against the wall and spoke softly. There was a storm once, he said, staring at the ceiling. Big one. On Earth. My dog used to crawl under the bed when thunder came. He thought the sky was angry. Riala didn't understand every word, but she caught some. Storm, dog, bed, angry sky. She looked at him. His eyes were soft. He didn't expect her to talk. He just shared the story and let it float in the cold air. The heat patch was still working. Her fingers moved again. She reached for the protein bar and unwrapped it. The first bite was dry but sweet. Tom gave a small nod. After a while, 2 engineers arrived. They spoke quickly and began checking the power system. The lights returned to normal. Warm air flowed from the vents. Tom stood and picked up his box before leaving. He pointed at the jacket on her shoulders. She looked down at it, then she looked up at him. He nodded once. She stood slowly and offered the jacket back, but Tom shook his head. He pointed at her and then the hallway. She understood. He wanted her to stay warm. Riala kept the jacket. She watched him disappear round the corner. That night, she didn't return to her usual spot near the tent walls. Instead, she sat outside the maintenance shed, where a few humans were cleaning tools. None of them looked at her strangely. She didn't speak, but she didn't hide. The cold had brought fear, but the human had brought warmth. Not just the jacket, but something else. Something quieter, something she didn't have a word for yet. The next day started like the others. The morning sky above Outpost 7 was pale, the kind of pale that made everything feel tired before it even began. The workers moved from one building to another, checking pipes, carrying crates, and logging reports. The air was calm but heavy. Riala stood in the waiting zone near the task board. The Valari had no leaders here, so every morning they were given new duties by human supervisors. A small screen showed names and assignments. Riala could not read the human writing, but she had memorized her name's shape and the symbols beside it. Today, when she checked the board, her heart sank. She recognized the symbol for repair deck. That meant she would have to work again near the engines. That area was noisy, hot, and full of sharp metal. And the worst part was that most instructions there were given by voice through translator devices. She reached for the small translator clipped to her collar. The device was thin and shaped like a folded leaf. It had helped her understand some human words since she arrived. It also helped them understand her when she dared to speak, which wasn't often. She pressed the power button. Nothing happened. She tapped it again. Still nothing. Her stomach tightened. She pressed it harder. No light came on. The translator was dead. A sharp voice called from the side hall. It was a human officer. He waved at her, then pointed toward the repair deck. She nodded slowly and walked in the direction he pointed. Even though panic was already growing inside her, she entered the repair deck. The sounds were loud here. Metal tools, steam valves, buzzing panels. Sparks flew as someone used a cutter on a support beam. A few humans were already working. One of them turned and saw her. It was Tom. He was adjusting wires on a wall panel. His shirt sleeves were rolled up again, his hands covered in dust. Riala stepped inside the room. Her translator still silent. Tom waved lightly, then pointed toward a box of tools. She tried to speak. She said the word broken and touched her collar, but without the translator working. Her voice was soft and strange. Tom frowned, noticing her trouble. He walked over and gently tapped the side of her translator. No response. He gave a small shrug and raised his eyebrows as if to say, "No problem." Then, slowly, he took a piece of chalk from his tool pouch. He walked to the wall and drew a simple picture panel with wires and a hand holding a tool. Riala tilted her head. He pointed at the picture, then at the actual wall. She understood. He wanted her to fix the wires. She picked up a screwdriver and knelt near the wall. Tom didn't hover. He stayed nearby but gave her space. He watched her work with careful eyes. When she struggled to match the wires, he stepped forward and, without touching her, pointed to the right order. Then he backed away again. It was strange. She had worked with others before, but they had barked orders, waved arms, or ignored her completely. Tom didn't speak much, but his silence was kind. By the time the panel was finished, the wires were smooth and the lights turned green. She sat back and wiped her hands. Her breathing was steady. Tom picked up a small data pad and tapped the screen. Then he turned it toward her. He had drawn a stick figure of a person giving a thumbs up. Riala gave a short breath through her nose, a sound close to a laugh. Before leaving, she knelt near a broken scanner lying in the corner. It was one of the old ones used for measuring pipe pressure. She picked it up, pressed a few buttons, and checked the inside panel. She saw what was wrong: a burnt connector. She opened her small pouch and took out a thin metal wire she had found near the vents. Days ago, in a few quiet minutes, she replaced the connector. Tom watched from a distance. When she stood and handed him the working scanner, he looked at her with surprise. He pressed the button. The screen lit up. He looked at her again and smiled, not a big smile, but a small one that reached his eyes. Riala nodded once, then turned and left the room. That night, when Tom returned to his small quarters, he found something on the floor outside his door. It was a folded leaf, carefully pressed into the shape of a bird. He bent down and picked it up. It was simple but skillfully made. A small piece of cloth, shaped like a wing, was tied to the back. Tom didn't know the Velari word for gift, but he understood the meaning. He placed the leaf bird on his shelf and looked out the window at the night sky. Somewhere out there, a girl who once flinched when he walked near was now fixing tools and folding leaves. And she had done all of it without saying a word. The days at Outpost 7 slowly started to change. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't loud. But something small was growing in the empty spaces between people, especially in the quiet space between Riala and Tom. Every morning, Riala still walked carefully and spoke little, but she no longer avoided the main paths. She walked through the center of the outpost now. She still kept her eyes low, but her steps were stronger, more steady. And every morning, something new appeared near the mess room wall. At first, it was a piece of paper with a drawing, a simple tree, a river, a mountain. Riala didn't know who had left it, but she had a strong guess. The next day, the tree had a small bird on one of its branches. The following day, there was a drawing of a round sun with lines that looked like light. Each one was left in the same spot. She never saw who placed them, but when she quietly added a drawing of her own, one of a curled Velari symbol, that meant safe place. She found it still there the next morning, with a flower sketch beside it. Tom never said anything about the drawings, and neither did she. But every day, they continued the silent exchange. One morning, she saw him outside the mess room, sipping something hot from a small cup. He saw her, too. He didn't wave or call her over. He just nodded. She didn't flinch. She nodded back. Later that week, Riala helped carry parts to the main fuel line. A few humans worked nearby, including Tom. She stayed at the edge, sorting wires and counting tools. Suddenly, a small child ran past her. The child was human, a boy, maybe 5 years old. His boots slapped the floor as he rushed forward, holding a round fruit in both hands. His laugh echoed in the air. The child tripped. The fruit rolled. It stopped near Riala's foot. She bent down and picked it up. The boy looked nervous. His smile faded as he stepped back slowly. Riala held out the fruit. Her hands were steady. The boy stared at her silver skin and large eyes. Then, slowly, he walked forward and took the fruit. "Thank you," he said softly. Riala tilted her head. She had heard the word before. She said nothing, but she gave a small nod. The boy smiled again and ran off. From the side, Tom watched the whole thing. He didn't say anything, but his eyes showed pride. That evening, another note was added to the mess room wall. It showed a human hand and a Velari hand holding the same fruit. This time, 2 other Velari stopped and looked at the drawings. One pointed at the paper, then at Riala. She said nothing, but she didn't hide either. The next morning, she found a small new symbol added to the corner of the drawing. Another Velari word. It meant watching. Not in a bad way. In a curious way. The silent lessons continued. Tom began using simple pictures to explain tasks whenever they worked together. One image showed a broken pipe with arrows. Another showed gears and the path of pressure flow. Sometimes he used small objects. He would stack stones to explain layers in a wall or point to shadows to show how light was blocked. Riala paid close attention. She never asked questions with words, but she answered with her hands. She fixed a broken filter faster than expected. She built a new wire path through a vent without being told how. Tom started leaving small puzzles near her tool's half-drawn schematics with missing pieces. The next day, he would find them completed. Each puzzle was a quiet conversation. Neither of them needed to speak. One evening, Riala stayed behind after work. The mess room was mostly empty. She stood near the wall where the drawings were still pinned. She looked at the first one, the tree, then the bird, the river, the sun. A light sound came from the entrance. It was Tom. He walked in carrying a new drawing. He paused when he saw her there. For a moment, both of them stood still. Then he slowly walked over and placed the new paper on the wall beside. The others. It was a picture of the outpost itself, with tiny figures, some Velari, some human, all walking together. At the top of the paper, written in simple block letters, was one word: together. Riala stared at it for a long time. Then she picked up a piece of chalk and, below the word, added a small swirl. It was the Velari symbol for hope. Tom looked at it and smiled. This time, she smiled too, just a little. But it was real. From that day on, more Velari came to the mess room during mealtimes. At first, they sat on the far side. Then slowly, some began sitting closer to the humans. One even shared a tool set with a human mechanic. And all the while, the drawings on the wall grew. New ones were added by different hands. A sunrise, a shared meal, to hands building something together. Riala still didn't speak much, but she walked with confidence. She still fixed tools and helped with repairs. But now, when someone thanked her, she nodded without fear. And when she passed Tom in the hall, they no longer needed signs or symbols, just a look, just a small nod. That was enough. Because sometimes silence taught more than words ever could. Outpost 7 was quiet in the early morning hours. Most of the workers were still asleep. Only a few lights blinked in the hallways. The machines hummed softly as the systems ran on low power. Riala was awake. She often walked early, before the others. She liked the silence before the busy day began. Today, she had been asked to check the water flow system on Deck 4. It was far from the living quarters, and not many people worked there. She didn't mind. She preferred quiet places. She walked down the narrow corridor with her toolkit, her steps light and careful. The air was still, but something felt strange. A small vibration under her feet, a faint smell, sharp and bitter, like metal burning. She stopped. The panel on the wall beside her flickered. Then the lights above her head blinked once, twice, then went dark. The sound came next, a deep, loud boom. The ground shook. A rush of heat followed as smoke spilled from the far end of the corridor. Riala dropped her toolkit and turned. Flames burst from a broken vent. Sparks flew. A pipe hissed loudly as pressure escaped. She froze. Her legs wouldn't move. Her heart pounded fast in her chest. Smoke filled her nose, stung her eyes. She tried to run, but her feet felt locked. Memories hit her like a wave of dark minds back on her home planet, of walls closing in, of fire without escape. She couldn't breathe. Another pipe burst, this time closer. The fire was growing fast, still. She didn't move. A voice shouted from behind the smoke. Riala. It was Tom. He appeared through the smoke, covering his mouth with one sleeve. He held a small extinguisher in one hand and a light in the other. Riala, come on. But she couldn't answer. She couldn't speak. Her body stayed frozen. Tom moved quickly. He didn't touch her right away. He stood in front of her, blocking some of the heat. His voice steady and low. It's all right. Look at me. Just look. Her eyes met his. The fear didn't go away, but something else entered her chest. A small spark of calm. His face was serious but kind. He was here. He was real. I need you to take a step, he said. She didn't understand all his words, but she felt the meaning. He pointed to the side hallway, a path away from the fire. Then he reached out his hand, not to pull, not to grab, just to offer. She looked at it. Slowly, her legs moved. She took one step, then another. Tom moved with her, not rushing, just guiding. The fire roared behind them, but they kept moving through the smoke-filled hall. Tom opened a side door and helped her inside a service room. He sealed the door and turned on the emergency fan. Fresh air flowed in. The smoke began to clear. Riala fell to her knees, coughing hard. Tom handed her a water pack. She drank it slowly, her hand still shaking. He knelt beside her but gave her space. They sat there for a long time, both quiet. After a while, she looked at him. Her voice was weak, but she spoke one word: thank. Tom nodded. You're safe, he said. She didn't know all the words, but she understood. Later that day, after the fire was put out and repairs began, the news spread around the outpost. A Valari had been saved by a human. No one had expected it. People whispered in the halls. Some were surprised, some were curious, but most just stopped to look at the fire-scorched panel and the dark burn on the floor. Tom didn't talk much about it. He returned to work as usual. But Riala changed, not in a loud way. She walked a little taller. When another Valari worker dropped a set of tools, she helped him pick them up. When a human technician struggled with a large crate, she stepped forward and lifted it with him. And when she passed the hallway where the fire had started, she paused and placed a small folded leaf bird on the wall, a quiet sign of memory. That evening, during the group meal, she sat at a table not far from Tom. Other Valari were there too. They didn't speak much, but they didn't sit apart anymore. A child walked by, another human child with a ball in hand. He dropped it near her foot. Riala picked it up and handed it back. The child smiled and said, "Thank you." This time, Riala replied with a small smile of her own. Not forced, not afraid. Real. Later that night, Tom walked past the wall near the mess hall. A new drawing had appeared. It showed a hallway with fire and a door open to light. Inside the light stood two small shapes, a human and a Valari, side by side. Below the picture, written in both languages, was one word: saved. Tom looked at the picture for a long time. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out his chalk. Beside the word saved, he added two more words: and trusted. The fire had left a mark on Outpost 7, not just on the walls or the floors, but inside the people who lived there. The smell of burnt metal and smoke was still faint in the air, a quiet reminder of what had almost happened. Riala sat near a window in the medical bay. The room was small, with soft white walls and bright lights. She had been there for a checkup after the fire. Her lungs still felt tight, but the doctors said she would be fine soon. She watched the humans and Valari passing by outside the window. Some moved quickly, busy with tasks. Others walked slowly, lost in thought. Tom entered the room quietly. He carried a small cup of warm tea and a thin blanket. He smiled when he saw her. She returned the smile, small but true. Tom placed the blanket around her shoulders. The warmth felt good against her skin. "I brought this," he said softly. Riala nodded and took a sip of the tea. It was sweet and mild. They sat together in silence. Neither of them spoke much, but this time the silence was comfortable. After a few minutes, Riala broke the quiet. She spoke in broken English. "Home. Far." Tom nodded. She continued, "Mine's dark, cold." Her voice trembled slightly. Tom listened. He knew the mines were dangerous places for the Valari. Many had lost family there. He thought about his own home on Earth, a place with green trees, rivers, and sunlight. He wanted to share that with her. Earth. "Rain," he said slowly. "Birds sing," he added. Riala's eyes widened. She smiled softly. It was the first time she had smiled like that since arriving at the outpost. Days passed, and the small room in the medical bay became a quiet meeting place. Other Valari began to visit. Some were sick, some just curious. Tom greeted them with kind words and gentle smiles. Riala helped translate with simple signs and slow speech. A few humans joined too. They brought small gifts: fresh fruit, clean clothes, warm blankets. The space filled with quiet laughter and soft voices. The walls of the medical bay no longer felt cold. One afternoon, as the sun shone through the window, Riala and Tom sat together again. They looked at a small book Tom had brought. It was filled with pictures: animals, trees, rivers, mountains. Riala pointed to a picture of a bird. Tom said, "Bird." She repeated the word carefully. Bird. They smiled. Then she pointed to a picture of a river. River. Tom said, river. She repeated. For the first time, Riala felt hope. Not just for herself, but for her people. Outside the medical bay, the outpost was changing to. More Valari and humans began working together. They shared tools, ideas, and stories. At the mess hall, groups mixed. Humans taught simple games to Valari children. Valari showed humans how to use their hand signs to communicate without words. The walls that had once separated them started to fade. One evening, during a community meeting, leaders from both sides gathered. They talked about the future. Riala stood quietly near the back. She watched the humans and Valari speak. When it was her turn, she stepped forward. Her voice was clear, but soft. She told the story of the fire, how Tom had saved her. How kindness had changed her fear into trust. She spoke of hope, of building a future where humans and Valari could live as friends. The room was silent. Then, one by one, people began to nod. A new plan was made, a plan to create a team of humans and Valari working side by side to rebuild the outpost stronger. Together. That night, Rial returned to the wall near the mess room. She added a new drawing. To hands, one human, one Valari joined together. Below the picture, she wrote in her language the word for friend. Tom saw it. The next morning, he smiled and wrote beneath it, in English, friend. Their silent story continued. The hall was full of people. Humans and Valari alike had gathered for the big meeting. The air was thick with hope and tension. This meeting was important. It would decide the future of Outpost 7. The leaders spoke first. They talked about plans, rules, and safety. They used many words, but some people still looked unsure. Fear was still there, fear of the unknown. At the back of the room, Riala stood quietly. She had been asked to speak. Her heart beat fast. Her hands trembled slightly, but she knew this moment was important. She stepped forward. The room grew quiet. All eyes turned to her. Riala looked out at the crowd. She saw faces full of worry, hope, and curiosity. She took a deep breath. Her voice was soft at first. I was scared, she said in broken English. When I first saw the humans, I flinched. I thought they would hurt me. She paused. She looked at Tom, who stood nearby. But then, she continued. A human showed me kindness. He did not shout. He did not force me. He gave me warmth when I was cold. Her voice grew stronger. He saved my life when fire came. He did not leave me. He stayed. The room was silent. No one interrupted. Riala spoke from her heart. Kindness can be quiet. It does not need words. It can be in small acts, a blanket, a smile, a helping hand. She looked around. We can be afraid, but fear can be broken by trust. Her eyes met Tom's. We are different, but we can live together, learn together, build a future. The crowd began to nod. A Valari elder stepped forward. He spoke in his language, and a translator repeated his words. We see your courage, young one. Your voice is a bridge. A human officer then said, this outpost will be stronger if we work as one. No more walls. The room erupted in quiet applause. For the first time, humans and Valari felt like a real team. After the meeting, people talked in groups. Some laughed, some planned new projects. Many thanked Riala for speaking. Tom smiled proudly. He walked to her. You were brave, he said. Riala smiled back. It was time, she said simply. Together, they walked outside into the evening air. The sky was clear, and stars shone brightly. Near the mess hall wall, a new drawing appeared. It showed a circle of many hands, human and Valari joined together. Below the circle was written one word in both languages, unity. Riala and Tom stood in front of the drawing. They did not need to speak. Their smiles said everything. Outpost 7 was no longer just a place of fear and silence. It was a place where the worlds met, where compassion could grow, where a human and a frightened Valari woman taught others that kindness was the strongest bridge of all.